Just days after classifying Germany's AfD political party an extremist organisation, the country's intelligence agency temporarily suspended using that label. It follows legal action from Alice Weidel's Alternative for Deutschland. So, what does such a classification mean for the second largest party in Germany? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, Alice Weidel's populist party, Alternative for Deutschland, was described as being incompatible with the free democratic order by the German intelligence agency and classified as extremist. But a dramatic reversal came after a legal challenge by the AfD accusing the outgoing government of a politically motivated smear campaign. As legal proceedings take place, what would be the implications for the AfD, and could it lead to them being banned?
It's a political party on the up, galvanising support in the East and becoming Germany's second largest party in the country's February elections. But earlier this month, Alice Weidel's AfD movement was named a far-right extremist organisation by the country's intelligence agency. The first such labelling since the Second World War.
Sofern bislang bekannt.
As far as we know, this is mainly intended to criminalise the expression of legitimate opinions and justified criticism of immigration policy. And in doing so, the Domestic Intelligence Service and the Office for the Protection of the Constitution itself are violating the German Constitution.
The decision, which gives extra surveillance powers, was made based on a 1,000-page report. It said the AfD promoted ideas against Germany's democratic principles such as equality and human dignity. It also cited the AfD's rhetoric against migrants and Muslims as evidence. The classification prompted the US to weigh in. The Trump administration is a fierce supporter of the AfD. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the decision tyranny in disguise. The AfD has launched legal action against the intelligence agency and, for the meantime, the classification has been paused. But what does this mean for the future of the AfD? And will this only help strengthen its popularity?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from Pittenweem in Scotland, we have Dr. Alim Baluch. He is a lecturer of German politics at the University of Bath. And in Berlin, we have Ben Aris. He is the founder and editor-in-chief of Intellinews and former Guardian bureau chief in Berlin. And also joining us from Berlin, we have John Kampfner. He's the author and foreign affairs analyst. You're very welcome to this roundtable. Alim, I'll come to you first of all. Just give us your impression of this initial classification of AfD as an extremist organisation, and now they're rolling back from it. What do you make of the AfD?
Well, the AfD started as a fairly moderate right-wing party that was all focused on anti-EU policies. They wanted to leave the currency union. It was founded by economists, but they left in disgust when the AfD pushed to the right. They were kind of pushed out. It's not a surprise to me that the AfD is labeled as extremist. I give you two pieces of evidence. One would be Björn Höcke, a well-established figure, maybe the most well-known AfD politician. He gave a speech a couple of years ago where he established a fundamental difference between Africans and Europeans based on biological concepts. He borrowed concepts from biology and said the Africans, they follow the R strategy of reproduction. They it's basically applied typically to insects or mice. They have lots of offspring. They don't spend time on parental care. He applied that to Africans in general. So that's a very extreme. This is what the Nazis did. They applied biological concepts to distinguish different groups of people from each other. He said the Europeans, they have the sustainable K strategy, fewer offspring, more parental care, and the Africans are the R strategy of the Africans that's based on expansion. So that's why we have to protect Europe from this African expansionist strategy. So using biological concepts, apply them to humans, that is as extremist as it gets. That rings a bell. People feel reminded of the Nazi time. Second, really brief, is the alienating of a religious minority. Obviously, in the Nazi time, we know what happened. Judaism was framed as not belonging to the German people. And in the AfD party program, we have the heading, Islam does not belong to Germany. So if we imagine it would be a different religion, let's say Judaism, we would all see the parallels. We have party election campaign posters, happy children. They seem very enthusiastic, and it says Islam-free schools. So the children are very happy that there's no Islam in schools. So again, if we think of a different religion being targeted, it becomes very clear why you see evidence that the AfD might be extremist. I'll leave it at that.
John, to you, how do you feel the debate over the last few days, whether AfD is extremist or not?
It falls within the context of a wider discussion about a concept called the firewall. This was created by the other Volksparteien, the mainstream political parties, several years ago during the first wave of populism, around the time shortly after Angela Merkel let in more than 1 million refugees from the Middle East and elsewhere, which provided the first major surge for the AfD. And the concept was that all responsible parties, as they call it here in Germany, the Demokratische Mitte, the democratic center, have to club together in the proportional system that Germany has and ensure that both at federal and national level and in the regions, in the Länder, the AfD cannot get anywhere close to power. Now, that worked pretty well and pretty seamlessly and uncontroversially, unless you're a supporter of the AfD, for as long as it was around 7, 8, 10, 15% even. But as soon as the AfD started to become, in the eastern region, the biggest party, and even in Western Germany, a significant force, and it was the second largest grouping in the recent general elections in February, that position gets increasingly hard to sustain. So it's a really wider dilemma now for German politics, for politicians, for everybody else involved in public life. What do you do with a political party that is representative of up to a quarter of voters in this country?
Ben, to you, surely all of this just plays into the hands of the AfD, telling their support base that they're viewed as extremists by the establishment. Whether that view and that ruling holds in the weeks to come, we wait and see. But surely this is a major win for the AfD being targeted in this fashion.
Absolutely. I mean, look, to extend what John was just saying, another piece of context you have to put this into is that you can see the AfD as a protest vote. And Germany has been very stable. It's been the most prosperous country in the EU by a long way. But that's not true at the moment. That's not true for quite a while, in so much as that Germany is now going into its third year of recession. And as John pointed out, the power base, the foundation of the AfD support is in the east. And the eastern part of Germany, following the reunification, has done very badly. It's had a lot of money poured into it, but ironically, it hasn't caught up. The incomes there are lower. There's been mass migration of young people from the east into the western part. And then what happened from about 2020, what Adam Tooze, an economist, calls the polycrisis. We started with coronavirus, and then we have inflation, and now we have a cost of living crisis. And so this well-being, this feeling of, feel-good factor that's been in Germany is sort of evaporated. And people have become very upset about what they see as a broken system. And so they've turned to radical parties, which always do well in hard times, particularly populist themes, xenophobic themes. I blame the immigrants for my economic problems. And that's where AfD has been getting its support. And what's worrying is that the support is now drifting into Western Germany. But as I say, the economy is on its knees already for at least 2 years because of this polycrisis. And that's just fueling the support. But it means also that the AfD can portray itself as the herald, the savior that's going to change the system, smash the system, a new system that's going to take care of people's interests of their well-being. And so the more it's attacked by the establishment, the more popular it becomes because it just feeds the same message. It's like they're out to get you. And it's all become quite extreme as a result, this positioning and all the problems that are going into it.
Thanks, Ben. Alim, to you, I noticed some comments from the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. He has called this decision tyranny in disguise, and he claims the German government will be better off looking at what he calls its open border immigration policies. He knows what buttons to press here, doesn't he?
Yes, and the US government is going out of its way to undermine Germany, and that might be perhaps related to trade policies, distract Germany, intimidate Germany. But it's of course nonsense. There's no open border policy. We had these few months in autumn of 2015 when the Merkel government had a sort of open border policy to deal with the humanitarian crisis in Europe. She did it reluctantly, actually. So that was rather chaotic, and she's still being rhetorically punished for it by the AfD and many Germans who feel that too many Syrian refugees came into Germany. But at the moment, there is no open border policy. But we see Elon Musk retreating Björn Höcke, the extremist AfD politician I mentioned earlier, who was speaking about the biological differences between Africans and Europeans. So this is all very concerning. The Trump administration and their advisors and their secretaries have no qualms about supporting extreme elements within the AfD and in Europe, even calling Nigel Farage not right-wing enough. And Elon Musk said we need a more right-wing alternative to Reform UK. So they are very much happy to interfere in domestic policies.
John, to you, tell me where you think this leaves the new Chancellor then, Friedrich Mertz. How does he handle this problem?
Otherwise known as the stillborn Chancellor, the Chancellor who, at the first attempt, for the first time in the history of post-war Germany, was not confirmed by Parliament on a couple of days ago. And this was for him a terrible blow because his coalition, admittedly only a two-party coalition, but it is one with a wafer-thin majority. And everybody is looking towards the next general election, due by 2029, and saying really that this is the last chance saloon for these democratic centrist parties, for this arena of parties taking in the CDU and its Bavarian sister party. The Liberals have been kicked out, the Free Market Centrist Party, the Social Democrats and the Greens. And now you have Die Linke, the left party, and they will be a fascinating force in this new parliament. But this is going to be the ultimate test. I think these concerns are a little bit exaggerated, but they are real. Now, what Merz has to do, particularly fragile now as a result of the events in the Bundestag this week, is that he has to kickstart the economy. He has to make some big moments. He, next Wednesday, is going to be unveiling his economic agenda called Agenda 2030. And he really needs to hit the ground running. I'm moderately optimistic, or at least I don't indulge in the usual German sport of deep pessimism as far as this country is concerned. He has got for himself, by hook or by crook, huge amounts of economic fiscal wiggle room, having done a 180-degree turn in terms of his aversion to borrowing. And now, hey presto, Germany has 500 billion euros on infrastructure and pretty much as it likes on defense. That is going to spring this country out of its economic malaise Now, where it leaves it or not will be hugely down to how this government performs and how he performs as a leader. And after Olaf Scholz, who I think was one of the most abject chancellors in German recent history, I think the field is open for Merz. The question is, can he deliver?
Well, Ben, that question to you then, can Merz somehow kickstart the German economy? And how does he begin to deal with the AfD?
Well, as John just mentioned, this 500 billion, after he managed to get through the end to the Schuldbremse, the restrictions on government borrowing, makes an enormous difference. And as I was saying before, that I think one of the aspects that's driving AfD's popularity is the economic hardship that's going on. And with that kind of money, you're going to get a fiscal stimulus in the economy that hasn't seen for years. And so that will hopefully bring Germany back to growth, and prosperity will defang AfD's appeal to some extent. He's got to be very careful, though, because there's been talk of banning the party. There was actually an attempt in January to ban the party as extremist, because for Germany, this is, of course, an acutely embarrassing or painful process, the far right, the reappearance of fascism in the country that spawned Hitler. And the knee-jerk reaction would be to ban the party, but the fear is if you do that, all you're going to do is pour more petrol onto the fire and undermine the party's popularity, and do that by delivering on economic growth, on better prosperity, and not use the sticks so much, try to strangle the party or smother it over time. That's going to be difficult. Because if you put this into a wider context, the EU in general is in trouble with the rise of the right. I mean, we're seeing country after country go to right-wing politics. That, in the Netherlands, you have an extreme party in Slovakia, you got Fico, who's also not necessarily far right, but definitely in that direction. And then in Romania, we just had a far-right president elected, and so everybody's facing these problems. But again, as I say, the European Union as a whole is intending to spend a lot of money on defence, which should give it a bump, which could undermine this. But it's going to be like tickling fish. It's going to be a delicate process.
Thanks, Ben. Alim, to you, whether people like it inside or outside of Germany, the AfD is now the largest party in opposition, and clearly millions of German voters like what they see and hear from Alice Weidel, the leader.
And that's why they will frame it as an attack on democracy. That's going to be the strategy of the AfD. We are the guardians of democracy. The established parties want to destroy democracy, and that's of course ironic given that the AfD is being labeled as extremist. So that's going to be the battle of narratives going into the next couple of months, and they will of course tie it into what happened in Romania and the election there.
John, to you, I mean, to widen it out, could you imagine a situation in the United Kingdom, for example, where the intelligence service, the MI5, announced that any political party is an extremist organisation? I mean, this has been a big, big development in Germany.
I mean, far-right parties have been banned in the UK in the past. I mean, I think you could turn your question, however, Enda, on its head and ask which countries, including the UK, could have an alt-right or a far-right government. I'm never quite sure what the distinction is. The Reform UK are now level pegging the polls, just as the AfD are in Germany. The French elections are, as ever, overshadowed by Marine Le Pen. And when Macron has to stand down, Marine Le Pen is under the shadow of a legal case that will prevent her from standing. That doesn't mean that her National Rally Party won't be allowed to stand. So legals are in confrontation, legal procedures are in confrontation with politics. But the worst case scenario is that a United States under Donald Trump with Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, and the other motley crew continually supporting alt-right, far-right parties across Europe and beyond, this is really an absolutely crucial time for mainstream parties to resist. Now, whether they should be resisted through legal means or by the older, tried and trusted mechanisms of just making things better for people in the economic realm, in terms of managing immigration, in all the other aspects of life, public service delivery, education, health, etc. The problem with that, and the problem with emphasizing delivery over everything else, is what is the role that social media is playing. People's lives can be improved, or at least not made worse, by a series of government interventions. But if the information or misinformation, disinformation that they are being bombarded with tells them that they are right to feel aggrieved, then they will continue to vote for extremes, and that's the danger.
Ben, to you, we heard John earlier on describe the Chancellor, Friedrich Mertz, as the stillborn Chancellor. Is he going to be strong enough to deal with the AfD over the next 4 years?
Well, this was a huge blow to him, wasn't it? I mean, failing to be elected in the first round and having to scrabble together the votes to just squeeze in. It's never happened before in Germany. And he was hoping to come out of the gate as a strong leader because he's got a huge task ahead of him, and shot off straight away to see Macron in Paris and Tusk in Poland. And the idea there was to build this Weimar Triangle, this strong leadership inside Europe, in order to deal with all these enormous problems, which will help, recover the prosperity in Europe, which will deal with everybody's far-right problem. And he's come out of the gate looking incredibly weak, sort of stumbled out of the gate into this task. Whether that remains a problem, whether he can recover from that remains to be seen. I think he probably will. As I said, simply the money available for him to spend is so enormous that he can do a lot with that. And that the optics of his failure to be elected immediately, he can get over that. But we need a strong chancellor. We need strong leadership because the whole EU system is crumbling. I mean, with America walking away, and it looks like it's going to dump the whole Ukraine problem into Brussels' lap, and then that's going to be a drain on European resources, and the unity that was to support Ukraine over the last few years has now disappeared, and we've gone from a joint US-EU effort to help Zelensky to reduced coalition of the willing, which is to say that not everybody in the EU is on board. And so we've got fragmentation going on inside the EU as well. That Orban has gone off towards Putin, Fico has also gone that direction. And these are all big problems that Germany, as a leader in this whole story, are going to have to deal with. And so he's really got his plate full. I mean, geopolitics on top of economics, on top of the rise of the right. And the AfD, all they need to do is just, not say too much, is keep their head down and let things go wrong, because they won 20% in the elections, unprecedented, came second. But the latest polls say that they're pegging level with CDU, and their strategy has to be not to screw up in the next 4 years and then win the next elections. And if they go to the polls and win the most votes, then democracy says that they should go in. That's the way it works. And if they bring these legal objections, like this is what's going on at the moment, to prepare for that, then that's going to cause possibly a constitutional crisis. And this is not the sort of place that Germany's been in for any length of time since Hitler came to power. It's going to be extremely tense. And as John says, it's a crucial time. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, and the jury is out. The EU is in trouble. The unity is falling to pieces because of all these strains, and it needs to be fixed. And that's going to be very difficult.
Thanks, Ben. Final point to you, Alim. Is Friedrich Mertz weak now until such time as the German economy improves and he can start winning the entire electorate round?
The German economy has to improve for millions of people who feel economically marginalized. Economic growth alone, being announced in the news, does not help people who are working for temp agencies, people who are disillusioned with post-reunification in Germany, People who had stable jobs 2 decades ago, but now they have precarious jobs. So precarization, that is a massive phenomenon in Germany, and I don't see Friedrich Mertz tackling that.
John, we'll finish with a prediction from you. Do you think the AfD will ultimately get banned in German politics?
No, I don't think it will. And I do think it would be counterproductive were it to be so. It needs to be defeated politically. I don't share the view that Mertz is a dangerous figure. He has done some crass things, not least flirting with the AfD in January. But I think he's got his eye on the prize, and he's an irascible, acerbic, not particularly lovable character. But I think, partly for absence of anything better, he's the right person for the time, and he's got to drag this country around, and I think he could.
John Kampfner in Berlin, thank you. Ben Aris and Alim Baluch as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.